On 1st March 2024, an alleged conference call between the head of the German Luftwaffe and several officers of the Bundeswehr was leaked on Russian social media. The conference was about the capabilities of the Taurus weapon system, a German-Swedish air-launched cruise missile. It is similar to the British Storm Shadow or French Scalp system, although with some major differences that are discussed in the conference. In this video we will cover if it could be a fake or not, who was allegedly involved, and what was discussed. This also contains various statements about the alleged involvement of US and British personnel in the Ukraine war. Some context first. Who were the potential participants of the conference? Generalleutnant Ingo Gehartz, he's the inspector of the German Air Force. The title inspector is a bit misleading, he's the commander of the Luftwaffe. Next is Brigadier General Frank Greve, he's chief of operations and training at the Luftwaffe command in Berlin. There are at least 3 more people involved, although the Russian graphic only shows 2. Note, I'm not sure about the names here. One is Oberstleutnant Florstedt or Frostette. He's part of the Center of Air Operations of the Bundeswehr. Oberstleutnant Fenske. He's part of the Center of Air Operations of the Bundeswehr as well. With his name, I'm rather sure since Oberstleutnant Udo Fenske wrote an article on electronic warfare in 2019. The last one is not listed by the Russians, yet he introduced himself shortly with Hauptmann Ehrgang, Captain Ehrgang, although my hearing isn't the best. Allegedly, the audio is several months old according to one source. From my understanding, it was a preliminary call before the German defense minister should get a short briefing on the Taurus weapon system. The officers also discussed potential training and missions in case the politicians would give the go to send the system to Ukraine. The duration is about 38 minutes. The audio was leaked by Margarita Simonvayan on VK, which is basically the Russian Facebook. She's the editor-in-chief of the state-controlled RT network. As a German native speaker, I listened to the whole recording, so I can talk as a native speaker about its content. However, we should consider the possibility that it is fake. Well, at first a transcript was leaked where according to at least one source it looked fake since the quality was rather low. Yet then the whole audio of 38 minutes was released. Several German bureaucrats then stated that this can't be faked. I myself give it a listen and I have to agree that this hardly can be faked. Or let's put it that way, if it was faked, it would be very scary on many different levels. German public media also stated that this is authentic, but considering their particularly recent track record, this is not necessarily a seal of approval. Yet what about the Russian claims? While the recording seems to be authentic, there are various claims made that this conference is about attacks against the Kerch Bridge that connects the Russian mainland with the Crimean Peninsula. From what I gathered listening to the audio, this is not the case. The Kerch Bridge is very likely discussed, although it is not named and it is referred to a bridge in the east, eine Brücke im Osten. But the discussion is about the capabilities and what would be necessary. This is typically hypothetical planning that militaries do all the time. There's also talk about training times, capabilities, and requirements. So let us take a look at some of the more interesting aspects of the conference that I particularly found interesting. For this, I'm pointing out specific elements of the discussion. Be aware that I might have missed or misunderstood aspects since the nature of the discussion was rather insider-like and not intended for the public. There is a mention of ongoing discussions on why Chancellor Scholz blocks the delivery of Taurus. As such, this leads to weird rumors, abenteuerlichste Gerüchte. One person specifically mentions that a journalist close to Chancellor Scholz noted that she heard that Taurus doesn't work, and that this would be the reason why Taurus is not delivered. To which the officer mentioned, wer erzählt denn so eine Scheiße? Who says shit like this? He thought that she might have picked that up from a political side, yet she noted it was from someone in uniform. He continues that he noted to her that this is total nonsense, totaler Schwachsinn. Then they talk about informing the defense minister briefly about Taurus. At one point they also mention PowerPoint, and someone specifically mentions that they have slides, to which one notes, don't bombard him with a slideshow with 30 slides. Nicht ihn zuballern mit einer Slideshow mit 30 slides. They continue about how support for Ukraine could be done if the politicians would give the go-ahead. Here they specifically talk about the potential support and how British and French support differs, namely that the British are more involved than the French, and that the British could help out with Taurus as well. The main question is how the mission planning would be done. This is a topic that comes up again and again. They also talk about the political side, namely that if when Chancellor Scholz would give the okay for delivering Taurus, that it would take several months to get the system ready for Ukraine. It is specifically mentioned that the industry noted it would take about 6 months to get the system ready, which either a Sukhoi or F-16. They note that the problem here is PR, namely if the Chancellor would say the Taurus gets delivered and then it would take another 6 months, that this was disastrous for the PR. They then talk about training times and also specifically mention that the English, yes, denoted Engländer, not British, did rewiring of Ukrainian planes. And when it comes to training times and adaptations, they also specifically note that the Ukrainian Air Force in terms of high-tech is probably better than the German Luftwaffe, and one should not underestimate the capabilities. They then talk about training times and note that for an ideal situation they would need 3 weeks for training on the industrial side and about 4 weeks for training from the Air Force. And then comes the repeated talk about mission planning and that the first missions would need some support by the Luftwaffe because the planning is rather complex. They specifically note that their own personnel, so the Luftwaffe personnel, is trained for about 1 year. Another hypothetical option is that a secure line from Büchel Air Force Base to Ukraine could also be done, which is a major German airbase. I thought, what irony when sichere Leitung, secure line, was mentioned. And they also specifically mentioned that target data is extremely important to reach a high amount of precision. At one point they mentioned precision of up to 3 meters. At one point the discussion is that Taurus won't change or won't win the war, and they discuss how many could be delivered, like at first 50 and then maybe again 50. But then this would be the end. In this context they mentioned something very interesting, that the French with the Scalp and the UK with the Storm Shadow are as good as Winchester. Winchester is a term that basically means out of ammunition or almost out of ammunition. The next part is particularly interesting because one of the officers analyzed what the main difference between the Taurus and the Storm Shadow is, and why the Taurus is particularly interesting. He mentions it's particularly interesting for 2 specific targets. A bridge in the east, eine Brücke im Osten, so this very likely refers to the Kerch Bridge, which connects the Crimean Peninsula with the Russian mainland, and the other is munitions depots. He notes about this bridge that is hard to reach and that the pillars are particularly small and hard to hit. Then they talk about limiting factors, particularly the number of Sukhoi 24s that are still available for Ukraine, and they note that the number is likely down to 1 digit. Then they also touch training again and note that the pilot can probably be trained in about 1 week, whereas then they talk about specifics about Taurus, namely mission data and the use of image planning. This likely refers to the issue that Taurus uses terrain-hugging navigation. Taurus is guided by an inertial navigation system that uses image-based navigation, terrain reference navigation, and of course GPS to the target. But it's capable of navigating over long distances without GPS support. Then there's a short discussion about the Kerch Bridge, and one officer notes that the bridge is basically like an airfield and that 10 to 20 Taurus would be necessary. Meanwhile, another one points out that one could target the pillars, yet then somebody else points out, yeah, but it's in the worst case, there's just a hole in the pillar and nothing more. And as such, it seems likely they were discussing the potentials, how it could be used. Generally, then the discussion is how the Bundeswehr could support Ukraine and what is possible. But they generally note that the political side, there will likely be a red line that the Bundeswehr is not involved at all. Yet at the same time, there's the problem that there needs to be some involvement because the system is that complex, and this is where the British get mentioned again, and that they could probably help out. To summarize, although there are some interesting details in there, specifically when it comes to statements that the British required some equipment and other aspects, but this seems to be nothing particularly new. Overall, the whole discussion on the German side is basically hypothetical and nothing real out of the order. It is mostly about if politicians give the go-ahead, what is possible, with what kind of involvement, like discussion on what aspects would allow to shorten training. This would allow to do certain missions. This would require a certain amount of Bundeswehr on this level or on that level. But overall, in the end, they conclude basically, yeah, the politics likely will not allow any involvement of the Bundeswehr, and so it's not a huge issue on this side. So of course, if you have a bad translation of these aspects, or you specifically read or listen to it with the intent of finding a conspiracy or something else, or involvement, you will find something. As so often, if you want to hear something, you will hear it. I talk from experience here. I have plenty of people accusing me of everything from pro-German, pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian, pro-American, etc., including all political leanings, by the way. Finally, I doubt that the recording is fake, and if it was fake, I would be extremely surprised and also scared about the capabilities of whoever did this to produce 83 minutes of German military jargon, analysis, and colloquial manners that sound convincing to several native-speaking bureaucrats and myself is not a small feat. Thank you for watching and see you next time.